The alarm clock screamed at 4:45 in the morning, the same way it did every weekday, relentless and unforgiving. Marcus Brennan slapped it into silence with more force than necessary, the plastic casing cracking slightly under his calloused palm. Then he lay there in the dark for exactly 30 seconds, giving himself that one small mercy before the chaos began, before the weight of the world settled back onto his shoulders like an old, familiar coat made of lead. Before we dive into this story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The house was cold. The heater had given up sometime in the night, gasping its last breath around 3 in the morning, if he had to guess. He could see his breath in the grey morning light filtering through the cheap blinds, thin wisps of fog that disappeared as quickly as they formed. 34 years old, and he felt 50, maybe older. His body ached in places he didn't know existed a decade ago, shoulders tight and knotted from hauling lumber all day. Lower back constantly reminding him he'd lifted one too many 2x4s without bending his knees, without taking the extra second to protect himself because there was never enough time, never enough hands, never enough of anything. His hands were a roadmap of his life, calloused and scarred from years of carpentry work, a jagged line across his left thumb from a table saw that had kicked back 3 years ago. Small burns on his fingertips from soldering pipes. Knuckles that ached when the weather changed, telling him rain was coming before any forecast could. These were working hands. Honest hands. Hands that built things and fixed things and tried desperately to hold a life together that kept threatening to fall apart. But he didn't have time to feel sorry for himself. Down the hall, his 2 kids were still asleep. Riley, 12 years old, stubborn and smart as a whip, too much like her mother for Marcus's heart to handle sometimes. And Owen, 7, still small enough to believe his dad could fix anything, still young enough to look at Marcus like he was a superhero instead of a man barely keeping his head above water. Marcus pulled on his jeans, stiff from too many wears between washes, and a flannel shirt that had seen better years. The elbows were threadbare, the collar frayed. He'd bought it at a thrift store 4 years ago, back when Sarah was still alive, back when they'd laughed about being broke but together. Now it was just a shirt, just fabric holding him together. He laced up his work boots, the leather cracked and worn, the steel toes scuffed from countless job sites, and padded quietly to the kitchen. The coffee maker sputtered to life, the only sound in the house other than the soft hum of the ancient refrigerator that wheezed like an old man with emphysema. Marcus stood at the counter, hands wrapped around a chipped mug that said, "World's Best Dad," in faded letters. Riley had given it to him for Father's Day 3 years ago, back when they still celebrated things like that, back before medical bills and grief had consumed everything. He stared at the stack of bills he'd left out the night before. They sat there like an accusation, like a reminder of every way he'd failed. Electric bill, past due by 37 days. The type was red now, threatening disconnection. Water bill, final notice. The envelope had been opened and closed so many times the paper was soft as fabric. And rent on the tiny duplex they'd been living in for the past 3 years, 2 months behind. The landlord, an older man named Mr. Chen who'd been patient, too patient, had left a note taped to the door yesterday. Marcus hadn't shown it to the kids. Didn't want them to see the words eviction and legal action in the same sentence. Marcus had been a widower for 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Not that he was counting, except he was. Every morning, every night, every moment in between. Cancer took his wife, Sarah, slowly and cruelly, in a way that left him broken, and barely breathing. First it was breast cancer. Then it spread. Lungs, liver, bones. The doctors had tried everything. Chemo that made her so sick she couldn't stand. Radiation that burned her skin. Experimental treatments that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. They'd maxed out credit cards, taken out loans against their car, sold everything that wasn't nailed down. And in the end, it didn't matter. Sarah died on a Tuesday morning in March, the spring rain tapping against the hospital window like it was trying to get in. She'd held his hand and told him to be strong for the kids, to keep building things, to remember that broken didn't mean worthless. Then she'd closed her eyes and let go. And Marcus's world had ended. The medical bills had buried them. $73,000 in debt. Collection agencies called at all hours. Letters arrived daily, each one more threatening than the last. The grief had nearly finished what the bills started. There were nights Marcus sat in his truck in empty parking lots, engine running, wondering if his kids would be better off without him, wondering if the life insurance would at least give them a chance. But he had Riley and Owen, and as long as they needed him, he'd keep swinging the hammer, keep showing up, keep moving forward, even when forward felt impossible. He heard footsteps, small and shuffling, the soft pad of bare feet on cold linoleum. Owen appeared in the doorway, clutching his stuffed dinosaur like a lifeline, hair sticking up in every direction like he'd been electrocuted in his sleep. His pajamas were too small, the cuffs riding up his ankles, but Marcus hadn't had the money to buy new ones yet. Maybe next month. Maybe. "Morning, buddy," Marcus said, his voice rough from too little sleep and too many cigarettes. He'd promised Sarah he'd quit. "Morning, Dad," Owen mumbled, rubbing his eyes with one small fist. "Is it pancake day?" Marcus looked at the near-empty fridge. He had eggs, maybe 4 left, maybe enough milk if he stretched it with water. But pancakes required flour, and the bag had run out last week. "How about scrambled eggs and toast?" he offered, trying to keep his voice light. Owen's face fell just slightly. A flicker of disappointment he tried to hide, but couldn't quite manage. "Okay." Guilt stabbed at Marcus's chest, sharp and familiar. A blade that never dulled no matter how many times it cut him. He'd promised pancakes on Friday. It was written on the calendar in Riley's neat handwriting. He'd forgotten. Again. Too many things crowding his mind, too many bills, too many worries. Not enough room for the small promises that mattered most. Riley came out next, already dressed for school in jeans and a hoodie Marcus didn't recognize. Probably borrowed from a friend. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, revealing a face that looked too old for 12, eyes that had seen too much too soon. She was growing up too fast, forced into maturity by circumstances neither of them could control. Her eyes, so much like Sarah's it hurt to look at them sometimes, took in the scene with the practiced assessment of someone twice her age, the bills on the counter, the dark circles under Marcus's eyes, the heaviness that hung in the air like fog you could almost touch. "You okay, Dad?" she asked quietly, setting her backpack down by the door. "Yeah, sweetheart. Just tired." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. "You ready for that math test?" She shrugged, a gesture that meant everything and nothing. "I guess. Mrs. Patterson said she'd give me extra credit if I need it." Marcus's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. It meant Mrs. Patterson had noticed the tired eyes. the worn clothes, the lunch money that was often missing. It meant the school was keeping an eye on them, waiting to see if they'd fall apart completely. It meant pity, and Marcus hated pity almost as much as he hated feeling helpless. They ate breakfast in relative silence, the kind that had become normal in the Brennan house over the past 2 years. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. Like they were all conserving energy for the day ahead. Owen pushed his eggs around his plate, making shapes with his fork. Riley ate mechanically, already mentally preparing for the day ahead. Marcus forced down 3 bites and called it enough. He dropped them at school, watching them disappear through the double doors into a world he couldn't protect them from. Riley walked with her shoulders squared, her chin up, trying to look confident even though Marcus knew she was scared. Owen turned back once, waving enthusiastically. His dinosaur clutched under one arm. Marcus waved back, fighting the familiar ache of wanting to give them more. More stability, more joy, more of the life Sarah would have given them if she were still here, if cancer hadn't stolen her away, if the world were fair. But the world wasn't fair. Marcus had learned that lesson the hard way. He drove to the construction site on the east side of town, his truck coughing and sputtering like it was on its last legs. The exhaust system needed work. The transmission was slipping. The check engine light had been on so long he'd stopped noticing it. He parked in the gravel lot next to the other workers' vehicles, trucks and vans covered in dust and dents. Vehicles that had seen better days but kept running because they had to. The foreman, a thick-necked man named Dale, with a permanent sunburn and a voice like gravel in a blender, waved him over. Marcus's stomach dropped before Dale even opened his mouth. He knew that look. He'd seen it before when other guys got cut. When budgets tightened. When someone had to go. And it was always the last guy hired. Marcus. Got a minute? Marcus set down his toolbox, feeling the weight of what was coming. Yeah. What's up? Dale shifted his weight from foot to foot, uncomfortable in a way that made Marcus's chest tighten. Look, man, I hate to do this. You're a good worker, one of the best I've got. But we're wrapping up this project early. Budget cuts from the main office. Corporate bullshit. I gotta let a few guys go. And since you're one of the last in. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. Dale, I know, Dale interrupted, not meeting his eyes. I know you got kids. I know things are tight. Hell, things are tight for all of us. But my hands are tied. I'll call you when the next job comes up, I promise. Soon as we get another contract, you'll be first on my list. It was a lie, Marcus knew. A kind lie, but a lie nonetheless. There were 20 guys ahead of him with more seniority, more connections, better luck. How soon? Marcus heard himself ask, hating the desperation in his voice. Dale shrugged, his expression pained. Month? Maybe 2? I don't know, Marcus. I really don't. Marcus nodded, jaw tight, not trusting himself to speak. If he opened his mouth, he might beg, or scream, or break down completely. He turned, walked back to his truck, and sat behind the wheel, staring at nothing. No job, 2 kids, bills stacked like a house of cards about to collapse. The math was simple and brutal. Without work, they had maybe 2 weeks before everything fell apart completely. He drove aimlessly for an hour, burning gas he couldn't afford, trying to figure out what to do next. Apply for unemployment. Hit up every construction company in a 50-mile radius. Maybe take night shifts at the warehouse, even though it paid half what carpentry did and would mean barely seeing his kids. Maybe ask his sister Jenna for money again. Even though she'd already helped so much and had her own family to support. Maybe. That night, after the kids were asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, the screen casting a pale blue glow across his exhausted face. He'd already applied to 8 jobs that day, filling out applications that all asked the same questions, required the same references, promised nothing. Now he was scrolling through rental listings, foreclosure auctions, anything that might offer a way out of the trap closing around them. Most places were too expensive. Others required first and last month's rent plus a security deposit, amounts that might as well have been $1 million for all the chance Marcus had of coming up with them. He was about to close the laptop and surrender to another sleepless night when something caught his eye. Foreclosure auction. $2,000, 847 Pinewood Drive. 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Needs work. Starting bid, $35,000. Marcus clicked on the listing, his heart starting to pound in a way that felt dangerous, like hope trying to take root in soil too barren to support it. The address was in Granger Heights, a neighborhood on the south edge of town that had seen better days decades ago. The kind of place where people kept to themselves and didn't ask questions, where chain-link fences sagged and porches collected junk instead of rocking chairs. The photos loaded slowly, one painful pixel at a time. The house was rough, no way around it. Peeling white paint that had gone gray with age and neglect. An overgrown yard where weeds stood waist-high and choked what might have once been flower beds. A sagging porch with missing boards like gaps in a mouth full of rotten teeth. Windows, covered in grime so thick you couldn't see through them. A roof that dipped in the middle like a swayback horse, ready to give up. But it had 4 walls and a roof. It had doors that locked, and rooms where his kids could sleep, without worry of eviction notices, and landlords banging on the door. And most importantly, it had a price. $35,000 starting bid. Marcus had $31,000 left from Sarah's small life insurance policy. Money he'd been hoarding like a dragon guarding gold. Too terrified to spend it, because once it was gone, there was nothing left between them and the street. He stared at the screen for a long time. War waging inside him. This was insane. The house looked like it might collapse if you sneezed on it. There was no way to know what kind of problems lurked beneath the surface foundation issues. Electrical fires waiting to happen, plumbing that would need complete replacement. It could be a money pit that swallowed his savings and left them worse off than before. But it could also be a chance. A slim, desperate, terrifying chance. He clicked through more photos, his carpenter's eye noting things others might miss. The structure looked solid despite the cosmetic damage. The bones seemed good, the roofline was intact. The windows weren't broken, just dirty. The siding was salvageable with work. He could do the work himself. Patch the drywall, replace broken fixtures, paint the walls, fix the porch. He'd built houses from the ground up. Surely he could resurrect one that was just wounded, not dead. His hand hovered over the mouse. One click to close the window and forget this crazy idea. One click to keep their money safe and figure out another way, somehow, to keep his family afloat. Or one click to register for the auction, to take a leap of faith that felt more like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below or just rocks waiting to break him. Marcus clicked register. The auction was held online, 3 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus sat in his truck in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant, using their free Wi-Fi, his hands sweating despite the cold. The bidding started at $35,000. Marcus typed in his maximum bid, $38,000. Every cent he had left. He watched the timer count down, heart hammering against his ribs. 10 seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Sold to user mbrennan77 for $38,000. Marcus stared at the screen, unable to breathe. He'd just bought a house sight unseen except for grainy photos. A house that might be uninhabitable. A house that represented every dollar standing between his family and complete ruin. He'd either just saved them or destroyed them, and he wouldn't know which until he turned the key. He told the kids that night over dinner mac and cheese from a box stretched with extra milk to make it go further. "I bought us a house," he said, trying to sound confident instead of terrified. Riley looked up, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. "You bought a house? With what money?" "The life insurance money. From Mom." The words tasted like ashes. Using Sarah's death to buy a broken house felt wrong, like betraying her memory. But she would have understood. She would have told him to do whatever it took to keep their family together. Owen's eyes went wide. "Do I get my own room?" "Owens. Do I get my own room?" "Yeah, buddy. Your own room." Is it a big house?" Riley asked, suspicious. She was too smart, had figured out too early that if something seemed too good to be true, it probably was. "It needs some work," Marcus admitted. "A lot of work. But it's ours. No landlord, no rent, just us." Riley's expression softened slightly. Something like hope flickering in her eyes before she tamped it down, protecting herself from disappointment. "When do we move?" "This weekend. I'll borrow Uncle Jake's truck. We'll make it an adventure." Owen cheered. Riley smiled. Small and cautious, but real. And Marcus prayed he hadn't just made the biggest mistake of his life. Moving day arrived on a Saturday morning when fog still clung to the ground, and the world felt suspended between night and day. Marcus backed Jake's borrowed truck up to their duplex, the engine rumbling loud enough to wake the neighbors. They didn't have much to move furniture that had been second-hand when they bought it. Boxes of clothes and dishes and memories, the small accumulation of a life that had been pared down to essentials and then pared down further. Riley and Owen helped carry boxes. Owen's contributions more enthusiastic than useful. Riley working with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned early that complaining didn't change anything. By 10 in the morning, they were done. The duplex sat empty behind them, hollow and sad, walls marked with nail holes and scuff marks, evidence of a family that had lived there but left no real impression. The drive to Granger Heights took 20 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that gradually shifted from maintained to neglected, from chain restaurants and strip malls to boarded-up shops and empty lots. Marcus watched Riley's face in the rearview mirror, saw her expression change from hopeful to uncertain to worried. Then they turned onto Pinewood Drive, and there it was. The house looked worse in person than it had in the photos. Somehow that seemed impossible. But Marcus pulled up to the curb and felt his stomach drop to somewhere around his knees. Riley was right. It looked haunted. Or cursed. Or both. Riley climbed out of the truck, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I know. It looks like it's going to fall down." "It won't fall down. The structure's solid." Owen bounced out behind her, still clutching his dinosaur, eyes wide. "It's big. Is the whole thing ours?" "The whole thing," Marcus confirmed, grabbing the keys from his pocket. They were brass, old, heavy with the weight of commitment and risk. "It looks haunted," Riley said flatly. Marcus sighed, exhausted, before the day had even really started. It's not haunted. It just needs some love. It needs a wrecking ball, Riley. She softened slightly, recognizing the warning in his tone, the edge of desperation he was trying to hide. Sorry, it's just. Are we really going to live here? Marcus looked at the house, at the peeling paint and sagging porch, at the windows dark with grime and the yard strangled with weeds. It was a disaster. It was terrifying. It was theirs. Yeah, he said, more confidently than he felt. We are, and we're going to make it home. The first week was a blur of chaos and work. Marcus took a sledgehammer to walls that needed to come down, revealing water damage and questionable wiring and mouse nests that made Owen shriek and Riley gag. He patched drywall until his shoulders ached, replaced broken windows with glass from the hardware store, bought on credit he'd have to figure out how to pay back later, fixed plumbing that groaned and rattled like it was possessed by vengeful spirits. Riley helped paint the bedrooms. She'd chosen pale blue for hers, yellow for Owen's, leaving the walls bright and hopeful, even though the rest of the house still felt like a cave. Owen mostly got in the way, but his enthusiasm was infectious. His belief that his dad could fix anything a balm, against Marcus's constant doubt. Slowly, painfully, the house started to look less like a disaster and more like a possibility. Not a home yet, but something that could become one if they worked hard enough, believed hard enough, refused to give up. But there were things Marcus couldn't explain. The basement, for one. He'd been avoiding it, focusing on the main floor where they'd be living. But finally, on day 6, he forced himself to go down. The stairs creaked ominously, and the air grew colder with each step, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else he couldn't quite identify, something chemical and sharp that made his nose wrinkle. The basement should have been simple according to the blueprint he'd found in the county records office. A rectangular space, maybe 800 square feet, concrete floor, and walls, suitable for storage or a workshop. But when Marcus reached the bottom of the stairs and flicked on his flashlight, the overhead bulb had burned out. Another thing to fix. Something felt wrong. The proportions were off. The eastern wall should have been further back, should have extended another 15 feet if the blueprint was accurate. But it didn't. It ended too soon, creating a space that felt cramped and unfinished. Marcus walked the perimeter, boots echoing on concrete, flashlight beam cutting through shadows that seemed to gather in the corners like living things waiting. He measured with his tape measure, counting out feet and inches, then compared his measurements to the blueprint. The math didn't work. The walls didn't line up. 15 feet of space was missing somewhere. He approached the eastern wall, ran his hand along the concrete. It was newer than the rest, he realized. Different texture, different color, like someone had patched it or rebuilt it, or... He knocked on it with his knuckles. The sound echoed back hollow. Marcus froze. He knocked again, moving along the wall. Solid, solid, hollow, solid, hollow. There was a pattern. A seam he could feel more than see. A faint line in the concrete that ran floor to ceiling, maybe 4 feet wide. His heart started to pound. This wasn't right. None of this was right. He pressed his ear to the cold concrete and listened. Silence at first, thick and heavy. Then, faint and far away, a sound, not wind, not pipes, settling, something else. A low, rhythmic hum, like machinery running deep underground. like something breathing in the dark. Marcus stepped back, his flashlight beam trembling in his hand. He was exhausted. He was stressed. He was probably imagining things, hearing ghosts in old houses, the way people always did when they were alone and tired and scared. Except the sound came again. Louder this time, closer, and beneath it, almost imperceptible, another sound. A whisper of air movement, like something on the other side of that wall had just taken a breath. Marcus backed toward the stairs, every instinct screaming at him to leave, to go upstairs where Riley and Owen were sleeping, to forget what he'd heard and pretend the basement was just a basement. But he'd never been good at pretending, and he'd never been good at leaving mysteries unsolved. He grabbed his sledgehammer from the tool pile at the base of the stairs. Probably just a utility line, he muttered to himself, voice too loud in the silence. Or a drainage pipe, something normal, something that makes sense. He raised the hammer and swung at the seam in the concrete. The impact reverberated up his arms, jarring his shoulders. The concrete cracked but didn't give way. He swung again, putting his weight behind it, putting his frustration and fear and desperation into every blow. Cracks spider-webbed across the surface. Third swing. Chunks of concrete broke free and clattered to the floor. Fourth swing. The wall gave way entirely, crumbling inward with a sound like thunder, revealing not a pipe or a wire or a logical explanation. It revealed darkness, a gap in the wall, an opening, a space that shouldn't exist. Marcus shone his flashlight into the void. The beam stretched forward, illuminating rough-hewn walls, a ceiling of packed earth held up by wooden supports, a passage carved directly into the ground beneath his house. A tunnel. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. His hands shook. This wasn't possible. Tunnels didn't just appear in residential basements. There had to be an explanation, an old root cellar, a storm shelter, something mundane and reasonable. But as his flashlight beam pushed deeper into the darkness, catching on something at the far end of the passage, something that gleamed metallic and deliberate and absolutely not natural, Marcus knew with cold certainty that whatever waited down there was neither mundane nor reasonable. It was something else entirely, and he'd just opened the door to it. Marcus stood frozen at the threshold, every survival instinct screaming at him to seal the wall back up, to pretend he'd never swung that sledgehammer, never heard those sounds, never discovered this impossible thing hidden beneath the house he'd bought for $38,000. But curiosity mixed with desperation is a dangerous combination, and Marcus had always been the type to face problems head-on instead of running from them, even when running would have been smarter. He took a step into the tunnel, then another. The air was cool and dry, not damp like he expected, and tinged with that same chemical smell he'd noticed earlier, sharper now, unmistakable. His flashlight beams swept across walls that had been carefully constructed, reinforced with wooden beams and metal supports. Nothing accidental or haphazard about them. This tunnel had been built with purpose, with planning, with resources that far exceeded anything a homeowner would have access to. The passage stretched for at least 50 feet before opening into a larger chamber. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as he stepped into that space, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness to reveal a room that made his breath catch in his throat. Stacked against the walls, lined up with military precision, were cases. Dozens of them. Maybe more than that. Large, reinforced, military-grade containers with heavy-duty locks and hinges that looked like they could survive a bomb blast. The kind of cases that held things valuable or dangerous, or both. Marcus stood in the center of that underground room, turning slowly, counting. At least 150 cases, maybe more in the shadows his flashlight hadn't reached yet. His hands were slick with sweat despite the cool air. His mind raced through possibilities, each more troubling than the last. Weapons. Had to be weapons. Some kind of survivalist stash or militia stockpile. Except the cases were too uniform, too professional. Government surplus? Military overflow? Stolen equipment? There was only one way to find out. Marcus approached the nearest case, crouching beside it, his knees cracking in protest. The lock was substantial, but not impossible. He pulled his pry bar from his tool belt, wedged it under the seal, and levered it up with a sharp crack that echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. He hesitated, his hand on the lid. Part of him didn't want to know what was inside. Part of him understood that opening this case would change everything, would start a chain of events he couldn't stop or control. But he'd already come this far, already broken through the wall, already descended into darkness. Turning back now wouldn't make the tunnel disappear. Marcus lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in shrink-wrapped bundles, stacked with obsessive precision, was cash. More cash than he'd ever seen in his life. $100 bills, crisp and clean, packed so tightly they barely moved when he touched them with trembling fingers. His breath stopped. His heart stuttered. The world tilted sideways. He backed away from the case, nearly tripping over his own feet, his flashlight beam swinging wildly across the ceiling. This couldn't be real. This was a dream, or a mistake, or some kind of elaborate prank. But his hands were shaking, and his pulse was racing. And the money was right there, undeniably real, impossibly present. Marcus forced himself to breathe. Think, calculate. Each bundle looked like it held $10,000, maybe more. Each case seemed to hold at least 20 bundles, maybe more beneath the top layer. 200,000 per case. Times 150 cases. $30 million. Maybe more, maybe much more. Hidden beneath a foreclosed house in a forgotten neighborhood, waiting in the dark for someone desperate or stupid enough to find it. And Marcus Brennan, single father and carpenter with 31 cents in his checking account, and kids who deserved so much better than he could give them, had just discovered it all. He turned and ran. Up the tunnel, his boots pounding against packed earth. Up the basement stairs, gasping for air that felt too thin, too sharp. Into the kitchen, where the morning light felt harsh and unreal after the darkness below. He braced himself against the counter, his heart racing so fast he thought it might explode, his mind spinning through 1,000 thoughts at once. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. People didn't just find millions of dollars in their basements. That wasn't how life worked. Not his life. Not the life of a broke widower barely surviving paycheck to paycheck. Except he had. He'd found it. And now he had to figure out what the hell to do about it. From upstairs came the soft creak of footsteps. Riley appeared in the doorway, hair messy from sleep, wearing an oversized t-shirt that had been Sarah's, her expression concerned. "Dad?" I heard banging. "What were you doing?" Marcus forced a smile that felt like it might crack his face. Just checking the basement. Thought I heard something. Turned out to be nothing. Just old house sounds. She studied him with those two knowing eyes. Eyes that had learned early to spot lies and half-truths. "You sure? You look weird." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Go back to bed." "It's early still." She hesitated, not quite believing him, but too tired to push. "Okay. Love you. Love you too, Riley girl." He waited until her footsteps faded back up the stairs. Then he sank into a kitchen chair, his head in his hands, and tried to figure out how his life had just gone from barely manageable to absolutely impossible. In the span of 30 minutes, somewhere beneath his feet, in a tunnel that shouldn't exist, sat more money than he'd ever dreamed of. Enough to pay every bill, clear every debt, give his kids the life they deserved. Enough to change everything. And Marcus Brennan, who'd never stolen anything in his life, who'd built his reputation on honesty and hard work, had no idea what to do next. Marcus didn't go back down to the basement that day, or the next. He threw himself into fixing the house with manic energy, patching walls until his shoulders burned, replacing fixtures until his hands cramped, painting rooms until the fumes gave him a headache. Anything to avoid thinking about what waited beneath his feet. Anything to pretend that tunnel didn't exist, that those cases weren't real, that his entire life hadn't just tilted off its axis into something dark and dangerous and utterly terrifying. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. The money haunted him. While he scraped peeling paint from window frames, his mind calculated how many bills $200,000 would pay. While he fixed the broken banister on the stairs, he imagined what Riley's face would look like if he told her she could go to any college she wanted without drowning in student loans. While he tucked Owen into bed and listened to him talk about dinosaurs and superheroes, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he'd stumbled onto something that could actually save them. By the third night, the not knowing was worse than the knowing. The uncertainty gnawed at him like a rat in the walls, constant and maddening. He needed to go back down, needed to see if he'd imagined it, exaggerated it, in his exhausted, desperate mind. Needed to count and calculate and understand exactly what he was dealing with. He waited until the kids were asleep. Riley had crashed around 9:30, exhausted from unpacking boxes and scrubbing floors. Owen had gone down at 8, his dinosaur tucked under one arm, his breathing soft and even within minutes. Marcus stood in the hallway between their rooms, listening to the sounds of his children sleeping, and felt the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on him like a physical thing. He was either about to save them or destroy them, and he wouldn't know which until he descended those stairs. The basement was colder than he remembered. Marcus flicked on his heavy-duty work light, the kind with a battery pack that would last for hours, and the beam cut through the darkness like a sword. The broken wall gaped at him, chunks of concrete scattered across the floor like broken teeth. The tunnel entrance looked smaller now, less imposing, just a hole in a wall leading into earth and shadow. Marcus stepped through. His boots crunched on loose gravel as he moved deeper into the passage. The wooden support beams overhead were solid, professionally installed, the kind of construction that required planning and expertise and money. Lots of money. This wasn't something a homeowner had built in their spare time. This was engineered, calculated, designed to last. The tunnel stretched further than he remembered. Maybe 70 feet before opening into that chamber. Or maybe it just felt longer because every step took him deeper into something he didn't understand. Something that whispered of consequences he couldn't predict. His light swept across the walls, catching on metal brackets and reinforcement plates, on power lines that ran along the ceiling. Dead now, but evidence that at some point this space had been active, functional, used. Then he was in the chamber again, and the cases were still there, exactly as he remembered. Not a dream, not an exaggeration. Real, undeniably, impossibly real. Marcus set his work light on the ground, angling it to illuminate as much of the space as possible. Then he began to explore systematically, like he was surveying a job site, taking inventory of what he was dealing with. The cases lined the walls in rows 3 deep, stacked too high in places. He counted carefully this time, moving around the perimeter. 157 cases. Not quite the number he'd guessed before, but close enough to make his stomach churn. He'd only opened 1 case, only seen 1 interior. For all he knew, the others contained something different: weapons, drugs, documents, anything. He needed to check more, needed to be sure. Marcus approached the second case in the first row, popped the lock with his pry bar, and lifted the lid. Cash. Bundled hundreds, shrink-wrapped and pristine. He moved to another case, further down. Same thing. Another case. Different row. Cash again. Every case he opened revealed the same thing. Money, money, and more money, stacked with obsessive precision, preserved like artifacts in a museum. He sat down hard on the cold concrete floor, his back against one of the cases, and started doing math. Each bundle definitely held $10,000. He could count the bills through the shrink wrap. Each case held at least 20 bundles visible on top, and when he dug deeper into one, he'd found 3 more layers beneath. 80 bundles per case. $800,000 per case. Times 157 cases. $125.6 million. Minimum. And that was if he'd counted correctly. If there weren't more cases hidden in shadows his light hadn't reached. If this was the only chamber. Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands. No service down here. The earth too thick overhead. But he didn't need service to use the calculator. He typed in the numbers again. Double-checking. Triple-checking. Hoping he'd made a mistake. But the math didn't change. Over $125 million sat in this room. Possibly more. Possibly much, much more. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. The walls seemed to press in on him, the weight of the earth above suddenly oppressive. This was cartel money. Had to be. No one else dealt in cash at this scale. Stashed it in military-grade cases, in underground tunnels beneath suburban houses. This was drug money, blood money. Money that people killed for, without hesitation or remorse. And he'd just spent $38,000 to become the legal owner of it all. Marcus stood on shaking legs and moved deeper into the chamber, his light pushing back the darkness. At the far end, he found something else. A desk. Old military surplus. Metal and scarred, with a locked drawer and a surface covered in dust, so thick he could write his name in it. He tried the drawer. Locked tight. He used the pry bar again, not caring about the damage, and the drawer popped open with a shriek of protesting metal. Inside were documents. Ledgers with columns of numbers that meant nothing to him. Maps with locations marked in red ink. Photographs of men he didn't recognize. Some in suits, others in casual clothes. All with the hard eyes of people who'd seen violence and committed it. And at the bottom of the drawer, a handwritten note on yellowed paper. The handwriting was shaky. The ink faded, but still legible. If you're reading this, then I'm already dead. Victor Salazar. May God forgive me for what I've done. The money belongs to the Salazar cartel out of Juarez. I skimmed it over 15 years. Thought I could disappear. Thought I could hide. I was wrong. They're coming. They always come. Don't make my mistake. Don't think you can keep it. Just run. The paper trembled in Marcus's hand. Victor Salazar. He'd seen that name somewhere. On the property deed, maybe? On some document when he'd bought the house? He couldn't remember through the fog of shock and adrenaline clouding his mind. Marcus folded the note, shoved it in his pocket, and backed out of the chamber. He needed to get out of this tunnel, needed to breathe air that wasn't heavy with secrets and threats. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time, sealed the basement door behind him, and stood in his kitchen, gasping like he'd just run a marathon. $125 million, hidden by a dead man, hunted by a cartel, sitting beneath his house like a ticking bomb waiting to explode. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, the screen's glow harsh in the darkness, and started digging. He typed Victor Salazar into the search bar and hit enter. The results loaded slowly, his internet connection struggling, but when they appeared, his blood ran cold. Victor Emmanuel Salazar. Born in El Paso, Texas in 1963. Moved to this town, Marcus's town, in 1996. Purchased the house on Pinewood Drive in 1998 for $72,000. Reported missing in 2001 after failing to show up for work for 3 consecutive weeks. House seized by the county for unpaid taxes later that same year. Marcus clicked on a news article from 2002. The headline made his stomach drop. Remains found in desert, identified as missing local man. He forced himself to read. Victor Salazar's body had been discovered in a shallow grave outside El Paso, dead for approximately 6 months when found. Cause of death: multiple gunshot wounds to the head and chest. Execution style. Execution style. The article mentioned that Salazar had been under investigation for money laundering and suspected ties to organized crime, specifically the Salazar cartel operating out of Juarez, Mexico. No relation had been confirmed between Victor and the cartel leadership, but the shared surname had raised flags. The investigation had stalled after his death. No arrests had been made. Marcus clicked on another article, then another, piecing together the story. The Salazar cartel had been one of the major players in the drug trade during the 90s, moving cocaine and heroin across the border, laundering money through legitimate businesses, controlling territory through violence and intimidation. In 2000, they'd been hit hard by a joint task force operation that had taken down most of their leadership. The cartel had fractured, gone underground, but never fully disappeared. And Victor Salazar, suspected money launderer, had vanished right around the time the cartel started hunting for missing funds. Millions of dollars that had disappeared from their accounts. Money they'd assumed was lost in the chaos of the takedown. Money they'd never stopped looking for. Marcus sat back in his chair, his mind racing. Victor had built the tunnel, stashed the money, and thought he could disappear. But they'd found him, tracked him to El Paso, executed him, and then, what? Lost track of the money? Failed to find the tunnel? Given up searching? Or had they been watching the house all these years, waiting for someone to buy it, waiting for someone to find what Victor had hidden? Marcus pulled out the note again, reading it by the laptop's light. They're coming. They always come. A chill ran down his spine. How long ago had Victor written this? Days before his death? Hours? Had he known they were close, that his time was running out? And if they'd been willing to hunt Victor Salazar across state lines and execute him for skimming their money, what would they do to Marcus Brennan if they learned he'd found it? The answer was obvious and terrifying. They'd kill him. No hesitation, no mercy. And probably kill his kids too, just to tie up loose ends, to send a message, to ensure no witnesses remained. Marcus closed his laptop and buried his face in his hands. He had 3 options, each more impossible than the last. Option 1. Report it. Call the police, the FBI, whoever handled this kind of thing. Turn over the money. Walk away clean. But that meant answering questions he couldn't answer. Meant investigations and attention and his name in databases where dangerous people might see it. Meant possibly being labeled a suspect himself. After all, he'd found cartel money in his basement and waited 3 days to report it. That looked suspicious. That looked like he'd been considering keeping it. Option 2. Keep it. Take the money and run. Pack up Riley and Owen in the middle of the night, drive to some other state, start over with new names and enough cash to last 3 lifetimes. But that meant looking over his shoulder forever. Meant teaching his kids to lie, to hide, to live in constant fear. Meant becoming the kind of person he'd promised Sarah he'd never be. Option 3. Something in between. Some middle path he couldn't quite see yet. Some way to protect his family without destroying them. Some solution that let him sleep at night without wondering when a bullet would find him in the dark. But he didn't know what that option looked like. Didn't know if it even existed. Upstairs, he heard movement. Small footsteps padding down the hallway. Owen appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching his dinosaur, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Dad, why are you awake?" Marcus forced a smile, though his face felt like it might crack. "Just working on some stuff, buddy. Adult stuff. Boring. Why are you up?" "Bad dream." Owen's lower lip trembled. There were monsters in the basement. They were trying to get us. Marcus's blood turned to ice. He stood, walked to his son, and pulled him into a hug that was probably too tight, too desperate. "There are no monsters, Owen. I promise. The basement is just a basement. Nothing down there can hurt you." But even as he said it, Marcus knew it was a lie. There were monsters. They just wore human faces and carried guns, and wouldn't hesitate to hurt a 7-year-old boy if it served their purpose. "Can I sleep in your room tonight?" Owen asked, his voice small. "Yeah, buddy." Of course. Marcus carried his son upstairs, tucked him into the center of the bed, and lay down beside him, staring at the ceiling while Owen's breathing gradually slowed and evened out. But Marcus didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. His mind kept circling back to that tunnel, to those cases, to the impossible choice he'd have to make. By morning, he still hadn't decided what to do. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was running out of time. The next 2 days passed in a haze of anxiety and forced normalcy. Marcus fixed the upstairs bathroom sink, installed new locks on all the doors, better locks, the kind that would actually slow someone down if they wanted in, and reinforced the basement door with a deadbolt heavy enough to secure a bank vault. He told himself he was just being cautious, just protecting his investment in the house, but he knew the truth. He was preparing for war. Riley noticed. Of course she noticed. Riley noticed everything. She cornered him on Wednesday afternoon while Owen was in the backyard digging for buried treasure with a plastic shovel, oblivious to the real treasure rotting beneath their feet. "Dad, what's going on?" She stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her expression so much like Sarah's, it made Marcus's chest ache. "You're acting weird, weirder than normal." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just stressed about money. You know how it is." "No," she shook her head. "This is different. You keep staring at the basement door like something's going to come through it. You installed, like, 5 new locks. You're barely sleeping. I hear you up at night. So, what's going on? What aren't you telling me? Marcus set down the wrench he'd been holding and looked at his daughter. She was 12 years old, still a child in so many ways, but grief and hardship had aged her beyond her years. She deserved the truth. Or, at least part of it. I found something, he said carefully, in the basement, something that might be valuable, and I'm trying to figure out what to do about it. Riley's eyes narrowed. What kind of something? I can't tell you yet, not until I know more. But Riley, I need you to promise me something. If anything weird happens, if you see strange cars outside, if anyone comes to the door asking questions, if anything feels wrong, I need you to call me immediately. And if you can't reach me, call Uncle Jake. Can you do that? Dad, you're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry, but I need you to promise. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I promise. But Dad, if we're in some kind of trouble. We're not. The lie tasted bitter. I'm just being careful. That's all. She didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. For now, that night, after the kids were asleep again, Marcus went back down to the basement, not to count money or marvel at his discovery, to think, to plan, to figure out his next move before someone else figured it out for him. He stood at the entrance to the tunnel, his work light casting long shadows across the walls, and tried to imagine what Victor Salazar had felt standing in this same spot 23 years ago. Had he been scared? Desperate? Convinced he'd found a way out? Or had he known, deep down, that you can't steal from cartels and live to spend the money? Marcus pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in over a year. Tony Graves. They'd grown up together, played baseball in high school, stayed loosely in touch even after life pulled them in different directions. Tony had joined the FBI, worked his way up through organized crime division, and now operated out of the regional field office 2 hours away. If Marcus was going to report this, Tony was the person to call, someone he trusted, someone who might actually keep him alive through whatever came next. His finger hovered over the name. One call, one conversation, and his life would never be the same. He'd be a witness, an informant, a target. He'd be trading one kind of danger for another. But at least it would be the right kind of danger. The legal kind. The kind where people with badges and guns tried to protect you instead of kill you. Marcus started to press the call button, then froze. A sound, faint but distinct, coming from upstairs, the creak of floorboards, the soft scrape of a window being opened. Someone was in his house. His blood turned to ice. He killed his light immediately, plunging the basement into darkness. His heart hammered against his ribs so hard he thought it might break through. He stood perfectly still, barely breathing, listening. More footsteps. Definitely upstairs, definitely inside. Multiple people, moving carefully, but not carefully enough. They were trying to be quiet. But old houses had a way of betraying even the most cautious intruders. Marcus's first thought was Riley and Owen. Asleep and vulnerable in their rooms, he had to get to them, had to get between them and whoever had just broken into his house. He moved toward the stairs, feeling his way in the dark, every nerve in his body screaming at him to run, to fight, to do something. He reached the basement door and eased it open an inch. Light from the kitchen spilled through the gap. Shadows moved across the wall. 2 men, maybe 3. Dark clothing, moving with the kind of practiced efficiency that spoke of experience. Not random burglars looking for electronics and jewelry. Professionals. Searchers. They were looking for the tunnel. They knew. Somehow. They knew. Marcus's hand tightened on the doorknob. He had seconds to decide. Stay hidden and hope they didn't find the basement entrance? Try to sneak upstairs and get the kids? Call the police and pray they arrived before things turned violent? Then he heard Riley's voice, sharp with fear. "Dad! Dad! There's someone in the house!" The men moved faster. Footsteps pounding toward the stairs. Marcus didn't think. He burst through the basement door, grabbed the wrench from the kitchen counter where he'd left it, and charged toward the stairs. "Riley, lock your door. Don't open it for anyone." One of the men appeared at the top of the stairs. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a ski mask and dark clothes. He saw Marcus and reached for something at his waist. A gun. He was reaching for a gun. Marcus threw the wrench. It tumbled end over end, clanging against the wall as the man ducked. And in that split second of distraction, Marcus rushed forward. He hit the man low, tackling him like he was back in high school football, and they both crashed to the floor of the upstairs hallway. The man's gun skittered across the hardwood. Marcus scrambled for it, his fingers closing around cold metal just as someone grabbed his ankle and yanked him backward. He kicked out blindly, felt his boot connect with something solid. Heard a grunt of pain. "Riley!" Marcus screamed. "Call 911 now." The man he'd tackled was getting up, blood streaming from his nose. A second man appeared in the hallway, also masked, also reaching for a weapon. Marcus pointed the gun at them with shaking hands. He'd never fired a gun in his life. Never wanted to. But desperation made you capable of things you never imagined. "Get out," Marcus said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Get out of my house. Now." The men exchanged a glance. The one with the bloody nose said something in Spanish, too fast and quiet for Marcus to understand. Then they turned and ran, boots thundering down the stairs, the front door slamming open, and seconds later, the sound of a vehicle peeling away from the curb. Marcus stood in the hallway, the gun heavy in his hands, his entire body shaking with adrenaline. Riley's door flew open, and she rushed out, her face pale, her phone clutched in one hand. Owen appeared behind her, crying. His dinosaur clutched to his chest. "Daddy! The monsters came. You said they wouldn't come." Marcus dropped the gun and pulled both kids into a hug so tight they probably couldn't breathe. "It's okay. They're gone. You're safe. I've got you." But even as he said it, Marcus knew it was another lie. They weren't safe. They'd never been safe. Not from the moment he'd bought this house and inherited its deadly secret. And now the people who'd killed Victor Salazar knew exactly where to find him. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Riley must have called before he'd even made it upstairs. Marcus held his children and listened to those sirens approach, and felt the last shred of his old life slip away into darkness. He'd found $125 million. And it had just cost him everything. The police arrived within 6 minutes. 3 squad cars, lights flashing blue and red across the dark street, officers emerging with weapons drawn. Marcus stood on his front porch with Riley and Owen pressed against his sides. All of them wrapped in the cheap blankets they'd bought at a discount store, trying to stop shaking from adrenaline and shock rather than cold. An officer approached, hand on his weapon, eyes scanning the house and yard. "Sir, We received a report of a home invasion. Is everyone okay? Is anyone hurt? We're fine, Marcus said, though his voice shook. 2 men, maybe 3, broke in through the back window. I fought them off. They ran, drove away in a dark vehicle. I couldn't see the make or model. The officer's eyes narrowed. You fought them off? Sir, these men were armed? One had a gun. I got it away from him. My Nestime. Where's the weapon now? Upstairs. In the hallway. I didn't touch it after they left. Just got the kids to safety. More officers entered the house, beginning their sweep and investigation. One stayed with Marcus, taking his statement, asking questions that felt both routine and uncomfortably probing. Had he noticed anyone suspicious in the neighborhood? Had he been threatened recently? Did he have any idea why someone would target his house specifically? Marcus answered carefully, measuring each word. No, he hadn't noticed anything unusual. No, he hadn't been threatened. And no, he had no idea why anyone would break into a nearly empty house in a run-down neighborhood. He was just a carpenter, recently bought the place at auction. Nothing valuable inside. All lies. All necessary. Riley and Owen were questioned separately by a female officer, who spoke gently and took notes on a small pad. Marcus watched from across the yard, his stomach churning. What would they say? Had Riley heard him talking about the tunnel? Had Owen mentioned bad dreams about the basement? But when the officer finally released them, Riley just shook her head. I told her the truth. I woke up to noise, called for you, then called 911 like you taught us. Smart girl. Sarah's daughter through and through. The police stayed for 2 hours, photographing the broken window, dusting for prints, collecting the gun Marcus had wrestled away. A detective arrived around midnight. An older man with gray hair and tired eyes who'd probably seen everything twice. He asked the same questions in slightly different ways, watching Marcus's face for inconsistencies, for tells. Mr. Brennan, the detective said, as they stood in the kitchen, away from the kids. I want to be straight with you. Home invasions in this neighborhood are rare. And when they do happen, they're usually drug-related or revenge-motivated. You're new here, just bought this house. Which means either someone is targeting you specifically, or they think this property contains something they want. Is there anything you're not telling me? Marcus met his eyes and lied with more conviction than he'd ever lied in his life. No, sir. Nothing. I'm just a single dad trying to give my kids a home. That's all. The detective studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. We'll increase patrols in this area for the next few days. And Mr. Brennan, if you remember anything else, anything at all that might be relevant, you call me, day or night. He handed over a business card. Because whoever broke in here tonight, they didn't find what they were looking for. Which means they might come back. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus took the card with numb fingers and nodded. By 2 a.m, the police were gone. The house was silent, except for the soft sounds of Riley and Owen, sleeping in Marcus's bed, neither willing to go back to their own rooms. Marcus sat in the kitchen with all the lights on, the detective's card on the table in front of him, his phone beside it. Tony Graves's contact information pulled up on the screen. He couldn't do this alone anymore. Couldn't protect his kids from people who broke into houses with guns and professional precision. Couldn't pretend this was something he could handle himself. His finger moved to the call button, then stopped. What time was it? After 2. Too late to call. Or maybe not late enough. Tony worked organized crime. Probably kept strange hours. Probably expected calls in the middle of the night from informants and witnesses, and people whose lives had just fallen apart. Marcus pressed call before he could talk himself out of it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then Tony's voice, groggy but alert. Graves. Raves. Tony. It's Marcus. Marcus Brennan. A pause. Marcus? Jesus, man, it's been forever. You okay? It's the middle of the night. It's Mandagrations or Bealicum, Evans. I need help. The words came out broken, desperate. I'm in trouble, bad trouble, and I don't know what to do. What kind of trouble? Tony's voice shifted. Suddenly professional, fully awake. Marcus took a deep breath. I've found something. In my house. In the basement. Money. A lot of money. And tonight, people broke in looking for it. People with guns. My kids are here, Tony. They're scared and I don't know how to protect them and I need help. Silence on the other end. Thick and heavy. Then, how much money? Over $100 million. Maybe more. I think it's cartel money. I think it belonged to a man named Victor Salazar, who used to own this house. Jesus Christ. Tony exhaled slowly. Marcus, listen to me very carefully. Do not touch anything else in that basement. Do not tell anyone else what you found. And do not leave that house until I get there. I'm 2 hours away. Can you hold on for 2 hours? Yeah. I think so. Good. Stay inside. Keep the lights on. Keep your phone charged. I'm leaving now. And Marcus, you did the right thing calling me. I'm going to keep you and those kids safe. I promise. The call ended. Marcus set down the phone and finally let himself breathe. He'd made the call, crossed the line from potential thief to witness. There was no going back now. Whatever came next, he'd have to face it. He looked up at the ceiling, toward the room where Riley and Owen slept, innocent and trusting. He'd brought them here thinking he was giving them a home. Instead, he'd brought them into a nightmare. But maybe, just maybe, with Tony's help, he could still wake them up from it. Tony Graves arrived at 6:47 in the morning, just as the sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. Marcus had been awake the entire time, sitting at the kitchen table with a baseball bat across his lap, and every light in the house blazing like a fortress against the darkness. He'd checked on Riley and Owen every 15 minutes, watching them sleep, memorizing their peaceful faces in case this was the last normal moment they'd ever have. The knock on the door was professional. 3 sharp raps, pause, 2 more. Marcus looked through the peephole and saw his old friend standing on the porch. Tony looked older than Marcus remembered from their last meeting 3 years ago at Sarah's funeral. More gray hair, deeper lines around his eyes, the kind of weariness that came from staring into darkness for too long. But his posture was solid, alert. And when Marcus opened the door, Tony's eyes swept the room with the trained assessment of someone who'd learned to spot danger before it announced itself. Marcus. Tony stepped inside, and they embraced briefly, the awkward hug of men who'd once been close, but had let life and distance wedge between them. You look like hell. Feel worse. Marcus locked the door behind him, 3 separate locks clicking into place. Kids are still asleep upstairs. Coffee? God. Yes. Tony followed him to the kitchen, his eyes taking in the reinforced basement door, the new deadbolts on the windows, the baseball bat Marcus had been holding. You've been preparing for a siege. Felt like I needed to. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee from the pot he'd made an hour ago. It was bitter and burnt, but neither of them cared. Tony, I don't know what I've gotten myself into. Last night, men with guns broke into my house. Professional, organized. They knew what they were looking for. Tell me everything. Tony pulled out a chair and sat. From the beginning. How you found it. What you saw. Everything. So Marcus told him. About buying the house for $38,000. About the basement that didn't match the blueprint. About breaking through the false wall and finding the tunnel. About the cases, 157 of them, and the money inside. About Victor Salazar's note and the research Marcus had done into the house's dark history. About the men who'd come in the night, hunting for something they believed was theirs. Tony listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When Marcus finished, Tony set down his coffee cup and rubbed his face with both hands. Okay. First question, does anyone else know about this? Anyone at all? No. Just you and me. The kids don't know what's in the basement. I haven't told anyone. Good. That's good. Second question, did you touch the money? Move anything? Take anything? I opened a few cases to see what was inside. But I didn't take anything. I swear, Tony. I thought about it. God knows I thought about it. But I didn't. Tony's expression softened slightly. I believe you. Third question, and this is the big one. Are you ready for what comes next? Because once I make the call to my office, once we start this process, there's no going back. Your life is going to change in ways you can't imagine. You'll be a federal witness. You'll be interviewed, deposed, possibly called to testify. And the people who want that money, they're going to want you silenced. Marcus thought about Riley and Owen sleeping upstairs, about the break-in last night and the terror in their eyes, about the choice between danger and complicity, between doing what was right and doing what was easy. I'm ready, he said. I have to be. Tony pulled out his phone. Then I'm calling this in. But Marcus, before I do, I need you to understand something. The FBI is going to protect you. We're good at it. But protection means rules. It means restrictions. It might mean relocation if things get bad enough. Are you prepared for that? If it keeps my kids safe? Yes. Tony nodded and made the call. Marcus listened to the one-sided conversation, hearing words like major recovery and cartel funds and witness cooperation. When Tony hung up, his expression was grim. They're sending a team. They'll be here in 90 minutes. In the meantime, I need you to wake up your kids and pack them a bag. They can't be here when the team arrives. Where are they going? You have family nearby, someone you trust completely. Marcus thought immediately of his sister. Jenna. She lives 2 towns over. She's got 3 kids of her own. Riley and Owen love her. Call her. Tell her it's an emergency, and you need her to take the kids for a few days. Don't tell her why. Not yet. The less people who know, the safer everyone is. Marcus's hands shook as he dialed Jenna's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice thick with sleep. Marcus? It's not even 7. What's wrong? Jenna, I need a favor. A big one. Can you take Riley and Owen for a few days? Maybe a week? Something's come up, and I need them somewhere safe. Safe? Marcus. What's going on? Are you in trouble? I can't explain right now. I will. I promise. But I need you to trust me. Please. There was a long pause. Then Jenna's voice came back, clearer now, more alert. Bring them over. I'll make up the guest room. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll have them there within the hour. He hung up and climbed the stairs to his bedroom, where Riley and Owen still slept, curled together in the center of his bed, like they used to do when they were younger, when Sarah was sick, and the world felt too big and scary. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed and gently shook Riley's shoulder. "Hey, sweetheart, wake up!" Riley's eyes opened, immediately alert. "Dad, what's wrong? Are those men back?" No, everything's okay. But I need you and Owen to pack a bag. You're going to stay with Aunt Jenna for a little while." "Why?" Riley sat up, her voice sharp with suspicion. "What's happening?" Owen stirred, rubbing his eyes. "Are we going to Aunt Jenna's? Can I bring my dinosaurs? All of them?" Marcus promised. "Riley, I need you to trust me. There are some things I have to take care of, adult things, and I need to know you and Owen are safe while I do it. Aunt Jenna's house is the safest place right now. This is about what you found in the basement, isn't it?" Riley's eyes were too knowing, too sharp. "The valuable thing you wouldn't tell me about." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but I'm handling it the right way. I called a friend who works for the FBI. He's helping me make sure everything is done legally and safely. But until it's resolved, I need you somewhere else. Somewhere those men from last night can't find you." Riley's face paled. "They're looking for us?" "No. They're looking for what I found, but I'm not taking any chances. So pack your bags, enough clothes for a week. And Riley, take care of your brother. He's scared, and he needs you to be strong." "I'm always strong," Riley said quietly, but her voice cracked on the last word. "That's all I ever get to be." Marcus pulled her into a hug, holding tight. I know, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry, but this will be over soon. I promise. And when it is, things are going to be better, for all of us." He hoped it wasn't another lie. By 7:30, Riley and Owen were packed and loaded into Marcus's truck. Owen chattered nervously about spending time with his cousins. Riley sat in silence, staring out the window, her jaw set in that stubborn way that meant she was holding back tears through sheer force of will. Tony followed in his own vehicle, staying close, his eyes constantly checking mirrors for any sign of surveillance. The drive to Jenna's house took 23 minutes. She was waiting on the porch when they arrived, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of worry and determination. She pulled Marcus aside while Tony helped the kids carry their bags inside. "Marcus, you need to tell me what's going on, right now. I found something in my house, something dangerous, something people are willing to kill for. The FBI is involved now, and until they sort it out, Riley and Owen can't be anywhere near me." Jenna's face went white. "Jesus, Marcus, what did you find?" "I can't tell you, not yet. But Jenna, I need you to promise me something. If anyone comes around asking about me or the kids, anyone you don't know, you call the police immediately. Don't answer questions. Don't let the kids talk to strangers. And if anything feels wrong, even slightly off, you take your family and you leave. You go to a hotel or Mom's house in Vermont or anywhere but here. Understand? You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared, but you should also know that I'm doing everything I can to keep us all safe. I made the right call. I'm cooperating with the FBI. This will be over soon." Jenna pulled him into a fierce hug. "You better be right. Because if anything happens to you, Those kids have already lost too much. Marcus said goodbye to Riley and Owen on Jenna's front porch. Owen clung to him, crying, not understanding why he couldn't go home. Riley stood stiff and silent, her eyes dry but haunted. "Be good," Marcus told them. "Listen to Aunt Jenna, and remember that I love you more than anything in this world. Everything I'm doing for you." "I know," Riley whispered. "Just don't die, okay? We already lost Mom. We can't lose you too. You won't. I promise." Another promise he desperately hoped he could keep. By 9 in the morning, Marcus's house on Pinewood Drive looked like a scene from a crime drama. 4 black SUVs lined the street. Men and women in FBI windbreakers moved in and out of the house, carrying equipment cameras, evidence bags, portable lights. Yellow tape cordoned off the property. Neighbors gathered on their porches and lawns, whispering, pointing, taking photos with their phones. Tony had briefed the team lead, a stern woman in her 50s named Agent Victoria Ramirez, who looked like she'd been carved from granite and didn't suffer fools. She'd taken one look at Marcus and then at the basement entrance, and her expression had gone from professional skepticism to grim determination. "Show me," she'd said. So Marcus had led her and 3 other agents down into the tunnel, watching their faces as they took in the scope of what he'd found. Agent Ramirez had stood in the center of the chamber, slowly turning, taking in the cases stacked along the walls. Then she'd looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect. "Mr. Brennan, do you have any idea what you've stumbled onto? Cartel money. From a man named Victor Salazar who used to own this house. Not just any cartel money. This is Salazar cartel money. They were one of the biggest operations in the Southwest during the 90s. When they went down in 2000, over $300 million vanished. The government, the DEA, the Mexican authorities, everyone searched for years. Most assumed it had been moved overseas or laundered so thoroughly it would never be recovered. But it was here, all along, hidden under a suburban house in a forgotten neighborhood. "How much is here?" Marcus asked. Ramirez had gestured to the cases. "We won't know exactly until we count it all. But if your estimate is accurate, over 100 million. Maybe closer to 200, once we account for inflation and appreciation of the bills themselves. This is the single largest cash recovery in FBI history, and you're the civilian who found it. Lucky me," Marcus had said bitterly. Now, hours later, Marcus sat in his kitchen while agents worked below. Tony sat across from him, reviewing paperwork. "You're officially a cooperating witness," Tony explained, "which means the government has an obligation to protect you. We're going to set you up with a security detail for now agents watching the house, tracking anyone who comes near. We'll also be monitoring your phone, your email, everything, just in case someone tries to make contact." "And then what?" Marcus asked. "How long does this last?" "Depends on what the investigation turns up. If we can connect this money to active cartel members, if we can build cases against people still operating, you might be called to testify. That could take months. Maybe longer. And my kids? When can they come home?" Tony's expression softened. "Not yet. Not until we're sure the threat has been neutralized. The men who broke in here last night, they're still out there, and they know you found what they were looking for." As if summoned by the mention of danger, Agent Ramirez appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her expression was grave. "Mr. Brennan, we need to talk. We've identified the men who broke into your house last night. One of them left blood on the floor when you fought him. We ran the DNA. His name is Rafael Cortez. He's a known enforcer for what remains of the Salazar cartel, currently wanted in 3 states for murder, kidnapping, and trafficking. Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. So he's still out there. He's still out there. And Mr. Brennan, there's something else. We've been canvassing the neighborhood, showing his photo to your neighbors. Several people reported seeing him around the area over the past week, sitting in a car across the street, walking past the house, asking questions about who lived here. He's been watching me. He's been watching the house. The question is, how did he know to watch it? Victor Salazar disappeared 23 years ago. His body wasn't found for months. The cartel looked for this money for years and never found it. So why, after all this time, did they suddenly know to watch this specific property? Marcus shook his head. I don't know. I bought the house at a public auction. Anyone could have been watching those listings. That's our working theory, Ramirez said. But it means they're patient, organized, and they're not going to stop just because the FBI showed up. If anything, our presence confirms that you found what they've been looking for. So, what do I do? For now, you stay here. You don't go anywhere alone. You don't talk to anyone we haven't vetted. And if you see anything suspicious, anything at all, you call immediately. She handed him a phone. This is a secure line. It connects directly to our field office. Keep it charged. Keep it with you at all times. Marcus took the phone with numb fingers. His life had become something from a movie, complete with federal agents and cartel enforcers and burner phones. Except in movies, the hero usually had some kind of plan, some clever way to outsmart the bad guys and protect his family. Marcus just felt lost. Over the next 3 days, the FBI presence transformed the neighborhood. Agents in unmarked cars sat at both ends of Pinewood Drive. The house was under constant surveillance. Every vehicle that entered the street was photographed and logged. Neighbors were interviewed, backgrounds checked, movements tracked. The community, already wary of outsiders, grew increasingly tense and suspicious. Mrs. Chen from 2 doors down knocked on Marcus's door on day 4. She was 73, had lived on Pinewood Drive for 46 years, and had the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. An agent checked her ID before allowing her onto the porch. Marcus, she said, her accent thick, but her English perfect. What is happening here? Federal agents, police cars, people saying you found something illegal in your basement. Are you a criminal? Should we be worried? No, Mrs. Chen. I'm not a criminal. I found something that didn't belong to me, and I reported it to the authorities. That's all. The FBI is here to make sure everyone stays safe. She studied him with those sharp eyes, then nodded slowly. You look like your father. He was a good man, honest. If you say this is not your fault, I believe you. But Marcus, these people who are looking for what you found, they came to my house yesterday. 2 men. They showed me a photo of you and asked if I knew where you worked, where your children went to school. I told them nothing. I closed the door in their faces, but they are out there, and they are not giving up. Marcus's blood ran cold. Did you tell the FBI? Of course. They took my statement. But I am telling you now because you need to understand you have brought danger to this neighborhood. Not on purpose, I know, but it is here now, and we are all afraid. She left without waiting for a response. Marcus closed the door and leaned against it, his heart pounding. The cartel wasn't backing off. They were escalating, asking questions, gathering information, hunting. And sooner or later, they were going to make another move. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat in his living room with all the lights off, watching through the window as an unmarked sedan sat across the street, agents inside keeping watch. His secure phone sat on the coffee table, its screen glowing softly in the darkness. He'd called Riley earlier, talking to her through Jenna's phone, listening to her voice tight with worry as she asked when she could come home. He'd told her soon. Another lie. At 2:17 in the morning, the secure phone rang. Marcus grabbed it, his heart racing. "Hello, Mr. Brennan. This is Agent Ramirez. We have a situation. Don't panic, but I need you to go to your back door right now and let my agents in. Do it quietly. Don't turn on any lights." Marcus moved through the dark house on autopilot, his body cold with adrenaline. He unlocked the back door and 2 agents slipped inside, weapons drawn, faces grim. "What's happening?" Marcus whispered. "We spotted 2 vehicles circling the block. Same vehicles that were reported near your sister's house 3 hours ago. They're coordinating. They're planning something. We're moving you now. Grab your wallet and keys. Nothing else. We need to go. They know about Jenna's house." Marcus's voice cracked. "My kids are there. We have agents there too. Your kids are safe. But you're the target, Mr. Brennan, and they're closing in." Marcus grabbed his wallet from the counter, his truck keys from the hook by the door. One agent gripped his arm, guiding him toward the back door. They moved quickly, quietly, slipping out into the night. The agent's vehicle was parked in the alley behind the house, engine running, lights off. They were halfway to the car when the world exploded. The front of Marcus's house erupted in a fireball of orange and red, the explosion so loud it felt like a physical blow. Marcus was thrown forward, hitting the ground hard, ears ringing. Through the chaos, he heard shouting, gunfire, the squeal of tires. Hands pulled him up. Someone was yelling in his face, but he couldn't hear through the ringing in his ears. He was shoved into the back of a vehicle. The door slammed. They were moving. Fast. Tires screaming against asphalt. Marcus looked back through the rear window. His house, the house he'd bought for $38,000. The house he'd poured his savings into. The house that was supposed to save his family was engulfed in flames, smoke billowing into the night sky. Neighbors poured out of their homes in pajamas, pointing, screaming, filming on their phones. The agent driving spoke into a radio. Rapid-fire commands Marcus couldn't process. Beside him, Agent Ramirez turned in her seat, her face illuminated by the orange glow fading behind them. "Are you hurt?" Marcus shook his head, though he couldn't be sure. Everything felt distant, muffled, like he was watching his life happen to someone else. "My house. Firebomb. Threw it through the front window and tried to pin us down with gunfire. They wanted to make sure you didn't get out, but we were ready. My neighbors. Mrs. Chen. Did anyone? Fire department's on the way. We had people evacuating the adjacent houses as soon as we spotted the vehicles. Everyone should be fine. But Marcus, you need to understand what just happened. They tried to kill you. Not scare you, not warn you. Kill you. This is now an active threat situation." The vehicle turned sharply, heading toward the highway. Through the side mirror, Marcus could see another vehicle following close behind. Protection or pursuit. He couldn't tell anymore. Couldn't tell who was friend or enemy. Couldn't tell if this nightmare would ever end. "Where are we going?" he managed to ask. "Safe house. Federal facility. Somewhere they can't find you, while we figure out our next move." And my kids, already being moved. Different location. They'll be safe, I promise. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to breathe. His house was gone. His neighborhood would never trust him again. His children were being moved like chess pieces on a board he couldn't see. And somewhere out there, men with guns and fire were hunting him for something he'd never wanted to find in the first place. All because of $38,000 and a foreclosed house with a secret buried in its bones. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a building 40 minutes outside the city. The kind of place designed to be forgettable. 2 bedrooms, basic furniture, windows with reinforced glass, and security cameras covering every angle. Agents were stationed in the unit next door and in a vehicle in the parking lot. Marcus was told not to leave, not to make calls except on the secure line, not to contact anyone from his old life. He spent the first day pacing like a caged animal, checking his phone obsessively for updates. Agent Ramirez visited in the evening with news. The fire's out. The house is a total loss. The explosion was a Molotov cocktail, crude but effective. We recovered shell casings from the street. 9mm, consistent with the weapons Rafael Cortez and his crew typically use. Have you found them? Not yet. But we're close. We've tracked the vehicles to a chop shop on the east side. We're setting up surveillance. When they surface, we'll grab them. And then what? Even if you arrest them, there are more. The cartel doesn't stop because you catch a few enforcers. Ramirez sat down across from him, her expression softening slightly. You're right. This is bigger than a few hired guns. Which is why we need you to make a decision, Mr. Brennan. We can offer you witness protection. New names, new location, full relocation for you and your children. You'd be safe, completely untraceable. But you'd be leaving everything behind. Your sister, your friends, your life. You'd become someone else, and you'd never be able to go back. Marcus thought about Riley and Owen, about starting over in some new town where no one knew them, where their mother wasn't buried, where their entire history was erased. What's the alternative? You testify. We use your discovery and cooperation to build cases against the remaining Salazar cartel leadership. We go after their operations, their money laundering networks, their distribution chains. We dismantle them completely. But that means you stay visible, you stay here, and you accept a certain level of risk until we finish the job. How long? 6 months. Maybe a year. We'd keep you under protection the whole time, but you'd be a target. They'd know you were cooperating. They'd know you were the reason their operation was falling apart. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at a parking lot full of anonymous cars. 2 choices, both terrible. Disappear and lose everything that made them who they were. Or stay and fight, risking death but keeping their identity, their dignity, their right to live their own lives. He thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she were here. She'd always been braver than him, more willing to stand and fight when the smart play was to run. She'd faced cancer without flinching, had stared down death, and refused to let it steal her spirit, even when it stole her body. I want to stay, Marcus said quietly. I want to fight, but not for me, for my kids. Because if we run, if we disappear, and become different people, then Riley and Owen lose their mother twice, once to cancer and once to fear. And I can't do that to them. I won't. Agent Ramirez nodded slowly. Then we'll protect you, all of you, for as long as it takes. One condition, Marcus said. I want my kids back. Not in hiding, not separated. Together. We face this together. That's not protocol. I don't care about protocol. My daughter is 12 years old, and she's been strong for too long. My son is 7, and he thinks monsters are real because they broke into our house with guns. They need their father, and I need them. So either we do this together, or I walk away right now, and you can chase the cartel without me." Ramirez studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. She spoke in low tones, listened, argued, listened more. Finally, she hung up and looked at Marcus. "Okay, we'll bring them here. Tomorrow. But Mr. Brennan, understand what you're committing to. You're making your children part of this. If something goes wrong, at least we're together. That's all that matters." The next afternoon, Marcus stood at the window of the Safe House apartment, watching the parking lot. At 3:47, an unmarked SUV pulled in. The back doors opened, and Riley and Owen climbed out, followed by Jenna. They looked scared and confused, clutching their backpacks, scanning the building with wide eyes. Marcus met them at the apartment door. Owen saw him and ran, crashing into Marcus's legs with enough force to nearly knock him over. Riley followed more slowly, her expression guarded, but when Marcus opened his arms, she stepped into them and buried her face against his chest. He felt her shoulders shake with silent sobs and held her tighter, whispering that everything would be okay, even though he had no idea if it would be. Jenna stayed for an hour, asking questions Marcus answered as truthfully as he could. Yes, they were in danger. Yes, the FBI was protecting them. No, he didn't know how long this would last. When she left, she pulled Marcus aside and gripped his arms hard enough to bruise. "You keep them safe. Whatever it takes. You keep my niece and nephew safe. I will. I promise." After she was gone, Marcus sat with Riley and Owen on the couch and told them everything. Not the sanitized version, not the careful half-truths he'd been feeding them. The truth. About the tunnel and the money, and the cartel, and the danger they were in. Riley listened with that too adult expression she wore when the world got heavy. Owen's eyes went wide, but he didn't interrupt. When Marcus finished, Riley was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "So we're staying? We're not running away? We're staying. We're going to help the FBI stop the people who want to hurt us. And when it's over, we're going to rebuild. Maybe not the same house, but a life. Together." Owen tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Dad, are you going to be a hero? Like in the movies?" Marcus pulled his son close and kissed the top of his head. "No, buddy. I'm just going to be your dad. That's the only hero I know how to be." Outside, the sun was setting. Agent Ramirez had told him the FBI was moving fast, building cases, preparing raids. Within weeks, they'd start arresting cartel members. Within months, the threat would diminish. But tonight, in this anonymous apartment with his children pressed against his sides and armed agents in the next room, Marcus Brennan made a choice. He wouldn't run. He wouldn't hide. He wouldn't let fear turn him into someone his kids couldn't recognize. He'd stand. He'd fight. And he'd show Riley and Owen that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to disappear when the world tells you that you should. Because some things are worth fighting for. And family is the first thing on that list. The conference room on the 7th floor of the federal courthouse had become Marcus Brennan's second home over the following 6 months. Gray walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed like angry bees, a long table scarred with coffee rings and the weight of countless cases. He sat there 3 times a week, sometimes more, reviewing documents with Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Park, a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and the kind of relentless focus that had put away cartel leaders and corrupt politicians with equal efficiency. Mr. Brennan, can you confirm this is the tunnel entrance as you first discovered it? She slid another photograph across the table. It was the 8th time she'd asked him to confirm the same details. The 11th time overall. Marcus had learned early that federal prosecutors built cases brick by brick, each fact verified and re-verified until the structure was unshakable. Yes, that's the false wall in the basement. That's exactly how it looked when I broke through. Jennifer made a note on her legal pad. Beside her sat Agent Tony Graves and Agent Ramirez, both of whom had become constants in Marcus's life. Tony had moved temporarily to be closer to the case. Said it was professional necessity. But Marcus knew better. They'd been friends once, and Tony was honoring that friendship by making sure Marcus and his kids survived this nightmare intact. And when you opened the first case, you immediately recognized it was currency. Yes. $100 bills, shrink-wrapped, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. Jennifer nodded. Good. The defense is going to argue that you could have misidentified the contents, that you were under stress, that the lighting was poor. We need your testimony to be rock solid. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Marcus had heard this before too. Every session started with the same warnings, the same emphasis on precision, because the cases Jennifer Park was building weren't small. Over the past 6 months, the FBI had arrested 19 individuals connected to what remained of the Salazar cartel. Not just street-level dealers and enforcers like Rafael Cortez, who'd been caught 3 weeks after the firebombing in a raid on a warehouse in Nevada, but lieutenants, money launderers, corrupt officials who'd been on the cartel payroll for years. Marcus's discovery had done what decades of DEA and FBI investigations couldn't. It had provided a money trail, so clear, so undeniable, that it connected criminal enterprises across 5 states and 2 countries. Every case Jennifer prosecuted traced back to that tunnel, to those 157 cases, to the $187 million Marcus had found. Yes, $187 million. The FBI's final count had exceeded even Marcus's estimates. Some cases had contained bonds and financial instruments along with cash. Others had held gold coins and uncut diamonds. Victor Salazar hadn't just been skimming drug money. He'd been managing a fortune. We're going to take a break, Jennifer announced, closing her folder. Marcus, you're doing great. Really. I know this is exhausting, but your cooperation has been invaluable. The trials start next month. Once you testify, once we get convictions, this part will be over. And the threat? Marcus asked. It was the question he asked at every session. The question that kept him awake at night in the safe house apartment where Riley and Owen were doing homework under the watchful eyes of federal marshals. Diminishing, Agent Ramirez said. With the arrests we've made, the Salazar cartel is effectively defunct. The leadership is dead or imprisoned. The remaining members are scattered, hiding. There's still risk. There's always risk when you testify against organized crime, but it's manageable now, especially with the protection protocols we have in place. Tony leaned forward. Marcus, we've been talking. After the trials, after you testify, We think it's safe for you and the kids to return to normal life. Not the safe house. Real life. You'd still have periodic check-ins, security assessments. But you could go home. What home? Marcus's voice came out more bitter than he intended. My house burned down. Remember, everything I owned was in there. Which is why we need to talk about compensation, Jennifer said. She pulled out another folder, this one thinner. Federal law allows for rewards to civilian cooperating witnesses, especially in cases involving asset recovery. The government has seized $187 million because you reported it. Because you cooperated. Because you put your life and your children's lives at risk to do the right thing. Marcus's heart began to pound. How much? 10%. Standard recovery reward for cooperation of this magnitude. $18.7 million. Mr. Brennan. After taxes, you're looking at approximately $12 million. Enough to rebuild your life. Enough to give your kids the future they deserve. The room tilted. Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. $12 million. For doing what any decent person should do. For refusing to steal money that wasn't his. For choosing his children's safety over wealth that would have destroyed them. I don't know what to say. Say thank you, Tony said with a slight smile. Because Marcus, you earned this. Not by finding the money, by turning it in, by standing up when you could have run, by being willing to testify when most people would have taken the witness protection offer and disappeared. You earned every cent. Marcus thought about Sarah, about her voice in the hospital telling him to be strong, to keep building things, to remember that broken didn't mean worthless. If she were here, she'd be proud, terrified, angry that he'd put himself in danger. But proud. When? He managed to ask. After the trials conclude. After the assets are officially forfeited to the government. Probably 8 to 10 months from now. But Marcus, you can start planning. Start thinking about what comes next. That night, Marcus sat with Riley and Owen in their small living room in the safe house. Owen was building something with Legos, his tongue poking out in concentration. Riley was pretending to read a book but kept glancing at Marcus with those two knowing eyes. You're being weird again, she said finally. Did something happen at the courthouse? Marcus set down the coffee he hadn't been drinking. Yeah. Something good. Really good. Come here, both of you. Owen abandoned his Legos immediately, climbing onto the couch beside Marcus. Riley moved more slowly, cautiously hopeful. Marcus pulled them close, one child tucked under each arm. So, you know how I've been working with the FBI and the lawyers, helping them understand what I found, and why it matters. The cartel money, Riley said. She'd long since stopped pretending she didn't understand what was happening. The money that almost got us killed. Yeah, that money. Well, the government takes that money as evidence. They use it to prosecute the bad guys. But there's a law that says, if someone helps recover stolen money, if they cooperate and testify, they get a reward. A percentage of what was recovered. Riley's eyes widened. How much? After taxes, about $12 million. Riley's book fell to the floor. Owen looked confused. Is that a lot? That's enough to never worry about money again, buddy. That's enough to buy a new house, pay for college, help people who need help. That's enough to change our lives. Riley was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a small voice, we don't have to move away. We can stay here, near Aunt Jenna and our friends. We can stay. We can rebuild. we can go back to living normal lives. Well, as normal as we can after everything that's happened. Owen threw his arms around Marcus's neck. Can we get a dog? Marcus laughed, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. Yeah, buddy, we can get a dog. We can get a lot of things. But more importantly, we can give things, help people, make a difference. Like Mom would have wanted, Riley said softly. Exactly like Mom would have wanted. The trials began in March, nearly 9 months after Marcus had first broken through that basement wall. The media descended like locusts. Reporters, cameras, satellite trucks, crowding the courthouse steps. The story had everything they loved. Hidden treasure, dangerous criminals, an ordinary man thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Marcus hated it. Hated the cameras, the shouted questions. The way strangers thought they knew his story, because they'd read 3 paragraphs online. But he showed up. Every day for 6 weeks, Marcus sat in the witness box and told his story. Answered questions from prosecutors and defense attorneys. Described the tunnel, the cases, the money. Explained his decision to report it rather than keep it. Faced down the cold stares of defendants who would have killed him without hesitation if they'd had the chance. Riley and Owen never attended the trials. Tony made sure of that, keeping them away from the courthouse, away from the media circus. But on the final day, when the last verdict came back guilty on all counts, Marcus felt something release in his chest that he hadn't known he'd been holding. It was over. Really over. The men who'd hunted him were going to prison for decades. The organization that had terrorized his family was dismantled. The threat was gone. Agent Ramirez found him in the courthouse hallway afterward, surrounded by reporters he was trying to avoid. She pulled him aside, into a quiet corner where the cameras couldn't follow. You did it, Marcus. It's finished. What happens now? Now, you go home. We'll maintain light surveillance for another 6 months, just to be safe. But you're free. You and your kids can go back to being a normal family. What's normal after something like this? She smiled. The first genuine smile he'd seen from her in months. I don't know, but you get to find out. Marcus returned to Pinewood Drive for the first time in almost a year on a Tuesday morning in late April. The street looked different, smaller somehow, less ominous. His property was still there. A vacant lot now. The burned remains of the house long since cleared away. The city had condemned the structure and bulldozed what the fire hadn't consumed. Only the concrete foundation remained. A scar on the earth, marking where his brief attempt at homeownership had ended in flames. Mrs. Chen saw him from her porch and walked over, moving slowly with her cane. She'd aged in the year since he'd seen her last, her face more lined, her posture more stooped. I came back. I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen. Sorry for the trouble I brought here. For the danger, the fire, everything. She waved his apology away with one gnarled hand. You did not bring danger. You found it. But then you did the right thing. Everyone knows now. We saw the news, read the papers. You helped put away very bad men. The neighborhood is safer because of you. I don't know about that. I do. And Marcus, I am sorry about your house, but I am glad you are alive. Your children need their father more than they needed. That old building. Other neighbors emerged as word spread that Marcus had returned. Some were cold, still resentful of the chaos that had disrupted their quiet street, but most were kind. A few even thanked him. My nephew got hooked on drugs, one man said. These cartels, they destroy families. What you did, helping take them down, that matters. Marcus stood on his empty lot and thought about what came next. He had money now more than he'd ever imagined having. The reward had been processed, deposited into an account he checked obsessively to make sure it was real. $12.3 million after taxes and fees. Enough to buy any house in the city. Enough to move somewhere new. Somewhere without memories and burned foundations. But as he looked around Pinewood Drive, at Mrs. Chen watching from her porch, at the neighbors who'd welcomed him back despite everything, he realized he didn't want to leave. This place had nearly destroyed him. But it had also revealed what he was made of. And maybe that meant it deserved another chance. Maybe they both did. Over the next 6 months, Marcus became a familiar sight on Pinewood Drive again. But not as the desperate father trying to survive. As a builder, a renovator, a man with purpose. He bought his old lot from the city for a symbolic $1. Then he bought 3 adjacent properties, abandoned houses, in similar states of disrepair, for pennies on the dollar. He didn't build himself a mansion. Instead, he built something better. 4 modest houses, well constructed with careful attention to detail, each with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, small yards, and solid foundations. 1 for his family. The other 3 sold at cost to families who'd been priced out of decent housing. Families like his had been struggling to find safe places to raise their kids. The neighborhood watched the construction with curiosity that gradually shifted to approval. Marcus hired local contractors, used local suppliers, ate lunch at the corner diner, where the owner, a woman named Rosa, made the best tamales in the city. He became part of the fabric of Pinewood Drive in a way he never had when he'd been hiding his discovery, lying to his neighbors, afraid of his own shadow. Riley and Owen thrived in the new house. It was smaller than the burned one had been, but it was theirs, truly theirs, owned outright. No mortgage, no landlord. Owen got his dog, a mutt from the shelter they named Biscuit, who slept at the foot of his bed and barked at squirrels with unreasonable enthusiasm. Riley got her own room with a desk by the window, where she did homework and wrote stories about girls who solved mysteries and saved their families. But Marcus knew the money couldn't just be about them. Sarah wouldn't have wanted that. Hell, he didn't want that, so he started making calls, setting up meetings. The Brennan Youth Workshop opened on a crisp Saturday morning in October, exactly 2 years after Marcus had first bought the cursed house that had changed everything. It occupied a renovated warehouse on the edge of the neighborhood, 5,000 square feet of space filled with workbenches, tools, and the smell of fresh-cut wood. The sign out front was simple: building skills, building futures, building hope. The concept was straightforward: free carpentry and trade training for at-risk youth. Kids from broken homes, kids in foster care, kids who'd gotten in trouble and needed a second chance. No experience necessary. No judgment, just a chance to learn something valuable, to create something with their hands, to discover that broken didn't mean worthless. Marcus had recruited help. Retired tradesmen from the community who volunteered their time. Tony, who'd taken a leave from the FBI to work as a safety coordinator. Even Mrs. Chen, who showed up twice a week to teach the kids basic budgeting and life skills because, as she said, building houses is useless if you cannot manage money. The first class had 12 students. By the end of the month, there were 27. By the end of the year, they had a waiting list. Marcus stood in the workshop on a Thursday afternoon in December. watching a 16-year-old named Deshawn sand a chair he'd built from scratch. The kid had been in juvie twice, had a record that would follow him forever, had told Marcus on day one that this was probably a waste of time because nobody gave a shit about kids like him. Now Deshawn ran his hand over the smooth wood with something like reverence. "It's straight," he said, almost to himself. "I made something straight, something that works." "You did," Marcus confirmed. "And you can make more. This is just the beginning, Mr. B." Deshawn looked up, his eyes uncertain. "Why do you do this? I mean, I heard you got rich, found some treasure or whatever. You could be anywhere, doing anything. So why here? Why us?" Marcus set down his coffee. He'd finally switched to drinking it because he enjoyed it, not because he needed it to survive. "You want the real answer?" "Yeah. Because someone gave me a chance once. Gave me an opportunity to do the right thing, even though it was terrifying. And that chance changed my life, changed my kids' lives. So now I'm passing it forward. Giving chances to people who deserve them, even if we've screwed up before. Especially if you've screwed up before. You know what I learned, Deshawn? Broken doesn't mean worthless. Broken just means you get to rebuild. And sometimes what you build the second time is stronger than what you started with." Deshawn nodded slowly, then went back to sanding his chair. But Marcus saw the slight straightening of his shoulders, the way his jaw set with determination, recognition that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. That night, Marcus sat with Riley and Owen at the dinner table in their small house on Pinewood Drive. They'd just finished eating spaghetti, Owen's favorite, and Biscuit was under the table hoping for dropped meatballs. It was ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. The kind of evening Marcus had dreamed about during those terrifying months in the safe house. "Dad," Riley said, twirling her fork through the last of her pasta, "I have to write an essay for school about courage, about what it means to be brave. Can I write about you?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I don't know if I'm the best example, sweetheart." "Are you kidding? You found $100 million and gave it away. You testified against drug dealers who wanted to kill you. You stayed when you could have run. That's superhero-level brave." It didn't feel brave. It felt terrifying. It felt like the only choice that would let me look at myself in the mirror. That's what makes it brave, though. "Right." Riley's eyes were serious, thoughtful, older than 13. "Being scared, but doing the right thing, anyway. That's what Mrs. Patterson said. She said courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and choosing right over easy." Owen piped up through a mouthful of spaghetti. "Dad's the bravest person I know. He fought bad guys with a wrench." Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and warm. "I got very lucky that night. But yeah, write about it if you want. Just remember that I didn't do it for recognition or reward. I did it because I had 2 kids depending on me to show them how to live in this world. And I wanted to show you that integrity matters, that doing right matters, even when it costs you something." "Did it, though?" Riley asked. "Cost you? I mean, we have this house now. You have the workshop. We're safe. Seems like doing the right thing worked out pretty well. It cost me months of fear. It cost me the first house I'd bought in my own name. It cost me the illusion that the world was simple and safe. But you're right. In the end, it gave me more than it took. It gave me purpose. It showed me what I was capable of. And most importantly, it taught you both a lesson I hope you never forget." "What lesson?" Owen asked. Marcus looked at his children. at their bright eyes and open faces, at the trust and love they offered so freely despite everything they'd been through. That money is just money. It comes and goes. Houses burn down. Jobs disappear. But who you are, the choices you make when nobody's watching, the integrity you show when it would be easier to lie, that's what lasts. That's what you pass down. That's what makes you rich in the ways that actually matter. Riley smiled. That's a good ending for my essay. Good. Now, who wants ice cream? Me. Owen's hand shot up, nearly knocking over his water glass. They ate ice cream on the couch. Watching a movie Owen had picked about talking animals and unlikely friendships. Halfway through, both kids fell asleep. Riley's head on Marcus's shoulder. Owen sprawled across his lap. Marcus stayed still, not wanting to disturb them, just breathing in this moment of peace and contentment he'd fought so hard to reach. His phone buzzed quietly. A text from Tony. Saw the news feature about the workshop. Good work, brother. Sarah would be proud. Marcus typed back, thanks. Couldn't have done it without you. Another buzz. You would have. But I'm glad I could help. Coffee next week? Coffee next week. Absolutely. Marcus set down his phone and looked around his small, warm living room. Pictures on the walls of Sarah and the kids, of better times and harder times, and the long journey that had brought them here. The TV played softly. Biscuit snored under the coffee table. His children slept safely in his arms. And, tomorrow, he'd wake up and go to the workshop and teach more kids that broken things could be rebuilt, that second chances were real, that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. He'd found $187 million in a tunnel beneath a cursed house. He'd turned it all in. He'd testified against dangerous men. He'd risked everything. And in return, he'd gained exactly this: a life worth living, children who understood integrity, a community that respected him, and the deep, unshakable knowledge that he'd chosen right when choosing wrong would have been so much easier. Marcus Brennan had found treasure. But he'd discovered something far more valuable than money. He'd discovered who he was when the world tested him. And that, more than any reward, more than any recognition, was the real fortune. The winter settled over Pinewood Drive with the kind of gentle cold that turned breath to mist and made hot chocolate taste like childhood. Marcus stood in the workshop on a Friday evening in mid-February, 3 years after that life-changing morning, when he'd swung a sledgehammer at a basement wall and opened a door to hell and redemption in equal measure. The workshop was fuller now. 32 students, ranging from 14 to 19, working on projects that ranged from simple birdhouses to complex furniture pieces that would sell at the annual fundraiser. The sound was beautiful to Marcus's ears. The rasp of saws, the tap of hammers, the low conversations between kids teaching each other techniques they'd learned, passing knowledge forward the way Marcus passed it to them. Deshawn, now 18 and a senior in high school, was teaching a new student how to properly measure and cut angles. He'd been with the program for 2 years, had built dozens of pieces, had discovered he had a gift for precision work. He'd already been accepted to a trade school for the fall, had a part-time job lined up with a local contractor. His life had turned around not because Marcus had given him money, but because someone had given him a chance and then taught him that his hands could build instead of destroy. A girl named Marissa, 16, with a history of foster homes and broken promises, was staining a bookshelf she'd designed herself. She worked with intense concentration, her tongue poking out slightly the way Owen's did when he focused. 2 months ago, she'd told Marcus she wanted to be an architect. Now she was taking online classes, studying design, building models of buildings she dreamed of creating someday. The bookshelf would go in her current foster home, a tangible reminder that she could create beauty even when her life felt temporary and fragile. Riley appeared in the doorway, home from school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She was 15 now, tall like her mother had been, with Sarah's fierce intelligence and Marcus's stubborn determination. "Hey, Dad. Mom's night, right?" They'd started calling certain Fridays Mom's night 2 years ago. Evenings when they'd cook Sarah's favorite meal, look through old photos, and tell stories about her so Owen wouldn't forget, and Riley would remember the good times instead of just the hard ones. "That's right. Can you grab Owen from Aunt Jenna's on your way home? I'll be done here in about an hour. Will do." She started to leave, then turned back. "Dad, I got accepted." Marcus's heart jumped. University of Washington. Riley's face split into a grin. "Full scholarship. They loved my essay. Great." Marcus crossed the workshop in 3 long strides and pulled her into a hug. "Riley girl, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. I wrote about you, you know, for my application essay, about finding money and giving it away, about choosing integrity over easy." The admissions counselor said it was one of the most honest essays she'd read in 20 years. "That's because you're honest. You learned that from your mom. She never sugarcoated anything. I learned it from both of you." Riley hugged him back, hard. "See you at home, Dad." After she left, Marcus stood for a moment, feeling the weight of everything that had changed. 3 years ago, he'd been a desperate man buying a foreclosed house with his last dollar, hoping to give his kids some scrap of stability. Now, his daughter was going to college on scholarship. His son was thriving. His workshop was changing lives. The money he'd been rewarded had been used carefully, invested wisely, shared generously. He'd kept enough to live comfortably, to never worry about bills again. But most of it had gone to the things that mattered: education funds for Riley and Owen, the workshop and its operating costs, scholarships for kids who came through the program, down payments on homes for families priced out of safe neighborhoods, donations to addiction treatment centers and foster care organizations. The money was still changing lives, just not in the way the cartel had intended. "Mr. Brennan." A quiet voice pulled him from his thoughts. It was a new kid, 15, skinny, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of hard nights and harder circumstances. I'm supposed to start today. The counselor at school said, "You might have space." Marcus turned, offering his hand. "We've got space. What's your name?" "Jamal." "Good to meet you, Jamal." "You ever work with wood before?" "No, sir. Never worked with much of anything. But I'm willing to learn. I need something, you know? Something that's mine. Something I built that nobody can take away." Marcus understood that need, had felt it himself once, standing in the ruins of a life that had fallen apart, desperate for something solid to hold onto. "Then, you came to the right place. Come on. Let's get you set up with some tools and a project. Something simple to start. You like music?" "Yeah. Yes, sir. How about a speaker box? Something to hold your phone, amplify the sound. Good beginner project. teaches you about acoustics and angles. Plus, you get something useful at the end. Jamal's face lit up with the first real smile Marcus had seen from him. That'd be cool. Marcus led him to a workbench, pulling out wood samples, showing him different types and grains, explaining the properties of pine versus oak versus maple. And as he taught, as he watched Jamal's careful attention, his cautious hope, Marcus felt that familiar sense of purpose settle over him like a comfortable coat. This was what he was meant to do. Not find treasure, not testify against criminals, not even rebuild houses or neighborhoods. Those were all parts of a larger whole. What he was meant to do was this: teach broken kids that they could build something beautiful, show them that their past didn't define their future, give them the tools and knowledge and belief they needed to construct lives worth living. The tunnel beneath his house had held money, but this workshop held something far more valuable. It held possibility. It held second chances. It held the future. That night, after Mom's night dinner, after the stories and photos and tears mixed with laughter, Marcus tucked Owen into bed. Owen was 10 now, still young enough to want his dad's company at bedtime, but old enough to ask complicated questions. "Dad," he said, as Marcus pulled the blanket up to his chin, "do you ever wish you'd kept the money? Like, all of it. We could have a mansion, a pool, a game room." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, thinking about his answer. "You know what? Sometimes, when I'm tired or things get hard, I think about it. But then I remember something your mom used to say. She said the best things in life are the ones you build yourself, not the ones you buy. And she was right. This house, I built it with my own hands. The workshop, I created it from nothing. Your sister going to college, that's because she worked hard, and I supported her, not because we bought her way in. Those things matter more than any mansion ever could. But you could have both. You could have kept some and built stuff. Maybe. But here's the thing, buddy. That money wasn't mine. It was stolen. And if I'd kept it, even a little bit, I would have become a thief. And thieves can't teach their kids about integrity. They can't look at themselves in the mirror without seeing someone they don't respect. I didn't want to be that guy." Owen was quiet for a moment, processing. "So, you gave it away to be a good person. I gave it away so I could stay a good person. There's a difference. Being good isn't about one choice. It's about choosing right every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Do you think I'll ever have to make a choice like that?" Marcus smoothed Owen's hair back from his forehead. "I hope not. I hope you never find yourself in a situation that's dangerous. But life is complicated, buddy. Someday you'll face something hard. Something where the right choice and the easy choice are different. And when that day comes, I hope you remember this story. Remember that your dad chose right even though it was terrifying. And I hope that gives you the courage to do the same." "I'll remember," Owen promised, his eyes already drifting closed. "Love you, Dad. Love you too, buddy. More than all the money in all the tunnels in the world." Marcus turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching his son sleep. Down the hall, he could hear Riley on the phone with a friend, talking about college plans and dreams that had once seemed impossible. In the kitchen, the dishes from Mom's night sat clean and drying, evidence of a family that had survived and thrived despite everything. He walked to his bedroom, to the desk where he kept his important papers. In the bottom drawer, in a folder labeled Keep, he'd stored a few things: the original keys to the Pinewood house, a copy of Victor Salazar's note, a newspaper clipping from the trial with the headline, "Ordinary Man's Extraordinary Courage," and a letter from Sarah, written in the last weeks of her life, that he'd found tucked in one of her books months after she'd passed. Marcus pulled out the letter. He'd read it 1,000 times, but the words never lost their power. Marcus, if you're reading this, then I'm already gone. I'm so sorry I couldn't stay longer. Sorry I'm leaving you alone with 2 kids and not nearly enough money. But I want you to know something. You're stronger than you think, braver than you believe. And whatever comes after I'm gone, whatever challenges you face, I know you'll face them with the integrity and courage that made me fall in love with you. Don't take shortcuts. Don't compromise who you are for money or comfort or fear. Stay true. Build things that matter. Teach our kids that doing right is more important than doing well. And remember, I'm always with you. In every good choice you make. In every moment of strength. In every lesson you teach Riley and Owen about love and honor, and standing up for what matters. I love you. I believe in you. Make me proud. Sarah. Marcus folded the letter carefully. His eyes stinging with tears, he no longer tried to hide. I did it. I did it, he whispered to the empty room. To Sarah's memory, to the woman who'd known him better than he knew himself. I made you proud. I chose right. And because I did, our kids are going to be okay. Better than okay. They're going to be extraordinary. He put the letter away, turned off the light, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow he'd wake up early, make pancakes for the kids like he did every Saturday, then head to the workshop to prepare for next week's classes. Maybe stop by the house he'd helped Mrs. Chen's grandson buy. Check in with Deshawn about his college plans. All ordinary tasks, all part of an ordinary life. But Marcus Brennan had learned something important during his journey. From desperation to redemption. Ordinary was extraordinary when you'd earned it honestly. When you'd chosen it over wealth and danger. When you'd built it with your own hands and filled it with people you loved and work that mattered. He'd found a tunnel full of money. But he'd built a life full of meaning. And given the choice between the two, even knowing what he knew now, he'd make the same choice every single time. Because anyone can find treasure if they're willing to dig. But it takes real courage to walk away from it when keeping it would cost you everything that truly matters. Your integrity, your children's respect, your ability to look at yourself in the mirror and see someone worth being. Marcus Brennan, single father, carpenter, workshop founder, had been tested by life and found worthy. Not because he'd found millions, but because he'd given them away and discovered that sometimes the greatest treasure is simply being able to sleep at night, knowing you did the right thing. That was wealth no cartel could steal and no fire could burn. That was fortune that would last for generations. And that was worth more than all the money hidden in all the tunnels in all the world. Up next, 2 more powerful true stories of courage, sacrifice, and redemption. Click to keep discovering what happens when ordinary people make extraordinary choices. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe doing the right thing still matters.